In part one of my video series about alienation, I exposed the inner workings of parental alienation, and I drew clear lines between the behavior patterns, the trauma legacies, and the personality traits that are common to alienators, to targeted parents, and to alienated children. And here's what became crystal clear. Alienation is not a legal issue. Alienation is a relational, psychological, behavioral issue that is rooted in fear, control, unresolved trauma, and identity enmeshment. But instead of recognizing this truth, we hand these fragile families over to systems that are built for war, not for healing. And these systems fail us over and over again. So in this part of the series, I'm going to examine these failures system by system with real case studies to show you just how destructive it can be when the wrong tools are used on a deeply human problem. Let's look at the legal system, which is adversarial by design and blind by default, because the family court system was built for disputes, not for healing. It's reactive, not preventative. It seeks winners and losers. And alienation doesn't play by those rules. So the legal system fails us because alienation is subtle, it's coercive and relational. It's not easily proven. And courts rely on evidence, not patterns of behavior or family history. And judges are rarely trauma-informed or trained in parental alienation. And the legal process itself implies and amplifies fear, power struggles, and vindictive behavior. And I'm going to share some case studies with you to prove my point. After a contentious divorce, a father was awarded joint custody. But within 6 months, the mother filed emergency motions alleging abuse, none of which held up under investigation. But because of the volume of accusations and the child's so-called wish to not see the father, the court suspended his access. He didn't see his daughter for 5 years, but no abuse was ever proven. Only a pattern of targeted alienation was apparent. In another case, a mother who had raised her son for the first 10 years of her life suddenly faced a custody battle when her ex-husband decided to move across the country. So in court, his lawyer argued that the child feared the mother. Despite the years of nurturing, this judge allowed the father to relocate with sole custody based on an unsubstantiated fear. And within 2 years, the child no longer even referred to the mother as mom. Here's another case study. After separation, both parents initially agreed to shared custody. But over time, the mother began alleging that the father was unstable, citing arguments that they had during the marriage. So even though no abuse was ever proven and the father had no record, the court awarded this mother sole custody based on the idea that she offered more stability. Can you believe it? So within a year, this child refused to visit his father at all. By the time he challenged this ruling again, the child was 14 and old enough to decide. But by then the alienation was cemented with the help of a system that confused calmness with truth. You see, courts often prioritize perceived calm or compliance over deep psychological manipulation, mistaking silence for suitability. Litigation escalates fear and control, which are the very roots of alienating behavior. When we look at mental health professionals who are often untrained, misguided, and even misused, they should be leading the intervention, but many of them are unintentionally making things worse. And they fail us because few mental health practitioners receive training in parental alienation specifically, in enmeshment or coercive family systems. Therapists often assume that neutrality helps when that actually enables the alienator. And they may mislabel alienation as attachment trauma or justified estrangement. They pressure to believe the child, even when the child's narrative has been carefully shaped by an adult, because they don't recognize it. And here are some case studies to show you what I mean. A father insisted that his children see a therapist who validated their fears of their mother, fears that only began post-separation. And this therapist, believing that they were child-led as they were trained, refused to even speak with the mother. It took a second independent assessment years later to uncover the emotional manipulation and the role reversal that was taking place. In another case, a father was ordered to take part in reunification therapy after months of alienation. But the therapist, with no experience in PA, concluded after 2 sessions that the relationship was too damaged and recommended suspending contact for the child's well-being. Can you believe it? This solidified the alienator's victory. Here's another case. Twin boys were referred for therapy after their parents' bitter separation. One boy maintained a relationship with both parents, but the other one aligned solely with the father and refused to see the mother. And the therapist diagnosed the resistant twin with oppositional defiant disorder and began individual treatment, ignoring the family dynamics altogether. The real issue, the enmeshment with the father and the guilt over the brother's loyalty, was missed altogether. Years later, the twin who stayed loyal to the father actually expressed regret, saying that he had cut out a part of himself just to please his father. Without training in loyalty conflicts and enmeshment, therapists may very well misdiagnose trauma-driven coping as individual pathology. Therapy must uncover manipulation, not accommodate it. And therapists must be trained to see what isn't being said. And then there are the medical professionals who are silent participants, because doctors often witness the impact of alienation, the stress symptoms, the anxiety, the sleep issues, but they rarely recognize the root cause. So they fail us because they defer to the primary caregiver, who is most of the time the alienator. Or they focus on the physical symptoms without actually exploring the family dynamics because they're not trained to do that. Or false claims of mental or physical abuse that the patients come to them with may lead to wrongful reports. They don't know whether the claims are true or not, and they are also not inclined to investigate it either. So the medical professionals are also in a very difficult situation. Here's a case. A child complained of panic attacks before visits with dad. So the mother told the pediatrician that the father was emotionally abusive. Without speaking to the father, this doctor diagnosed the child with an anxiety disorder triggered by paternal presence. Can you believe it? And this label was later used in court to justify custody removal. In another case, a teenager told the doctor that she didn't feel safe with her father, and the physician made a referral to the Child Protection Services, which is required by law, but no abuse was found. But the note remained in her medical records and was referenced in future custody hearings. So she didn't see her father again for 4 years. And another young boy began reporting stomach aches and headaches every Friday before the weekend visits with his father. And his mother took him to a pediatrician who concluded that these symptoms were stress-related. His father requested to be included in these appointments, but he was repeatedly excluded. And as a result, this doctor never learned that the mother had been telling the boy that visits with dad are optional if you feel sick. So eventually, the boy just stopped going altogether. Psychosomatic symptoms in children are often misread by physicians who aren't trained to detect emotional manipulation, because doctors treat the symptoms, but alienation is the disease and it goes unnoticed. And here's a tough one, the schools. They are the unknowing enablers of this horrifying thing. Schools are often the place where alienation becomes visible in absences, behavior changes, secrecy. But you know what? They rarely intervene. They just assume that the non-participating parent is absent by choice. They rely solely on the custodial parent for communication. They exclude the other parent from records, reports, updates, and school events. And they validate the hostility in the name of child preference. I'll tell you some cases. A mother tried to attend her daughter's recital, but the school said that she didn't have two parents listed. When she showed her court order, what did they do? They called security. And her daughter saw this whole debacle unfold. And as a result, she never replied to her mother's messages ever again. In another case, a father contacted the school to say the mother was unstable and abusive and should not attend any events. Though no protection order existed, the school just complied. No one contacted the mother to confirm or to investigate. And her erasure was complete, just like that. Another case, a mother consistently left the father off the school emergency contact forms, the event invitations, the parent-teacher correspondence, despite a shared custody agreement. So when the father showed up to a school event, the staff treated him as an intruder. And when he protested, the school said, "We just follow what's on the file." The file, of course, had been curated by the alienating parent, and over time, his absence at the school functions was seen by the child as disinterest, not as the exclusion that it actually was. When schools rely on what's in the file, they risk validating distorted realities and aiding COVID alienation. But when schools take one side, they become agents of alienation, even if it's unintentional. Let's look at social services which are weaponized through misunderstandings quite often. Child protection agencies exist to protect, but they are being used to destroy relationships, often unknowingly. They lack the tools to differentiate false allegations from genuine abuse. Alienators often make serial, unfounded reports to discredit the other parent. And social workers are overburdened and undertrained in high conflict psychological dynamics. That's just a fact. Like this father, for example, who was investigated repeatedly for abuse after each access visit. Though every report was deemed unfounded, the Child Protection Services documented each claim. So when he fought for more access, the judge reviewed the history in the file and just restricted him further because there was this long list of claims. Another father spread concerns through daycare and school and child protection services that the mother was controlling and aggressive. Though no report stuck, this child was constantly reminded that her mother might be dangerous, and eventually she believed it. A teenage boy told a guidance counselor that he hated going to his dad's and he felt controlled there. The counselor made a mandated report, and Child Protective Services opened a case. And this father, who was a structured, consistent parent, was investigated and cleared. But the mother used this investigation as proof of his so-called instability in court. And this boy later admitted that he exaggerated because he felt caught in the middle. When children are triangulated, as you see here, they may present with distorted truths. Without context, mandated interventions can really do a lot of harm. Social services should protect children, but without awareness of alienation, they actually protect the manipulator. And then there's our culture and the media, which is shaping a dangerous narrative. We live in a world that loves an easy story, abusive men, heroic mothers, or vice versa. But alienation isn't so simple. Media frames rejection as strength and estrangement as empowerment. Really? Cultural narratives prize independence, even when it's driven by manipulation. And there's little understanding of coercive control in family dynamics. One high conflict parent posted daily TikToks about escaping a toxic ex. His child, exposed to this content, adapted the narrative. And years later in therapy, the child actually admitted that she never actually experienced what her father described, but just believed that it must be true. A mother alienated from her son was vilified in their tight-knit town after a one-sided social media post went viral. Though she did have court-ordered access, Public pressure led her to back down and disappear from her son's life altogether. And a teenage girl began posting on social media about her toxic mom after being encouraged by her father to speak her truth. And her posts gained traction, including comments from peers and even influencers affirming her story. The reality? She'd had a close bond with her mother until her father cut off contact at the age of 13. And now she's caught up in a public story of victimhood. She finds it almost impossible to walk it back, even as her doubts started growing. So when social validation rewards estrangement narratives, children are locked into roles that they may later regret, but they feel unable to exit. When alienation is turned into a narrative, the child loses their right to the full truth. Parental alienation is a mental health crisis, not a legal puzzle. It cannot be solved with threats, ultimatums, or court battles. In fact, those things usually make it worse. Our systems are failing because they weren't built for this. They aren't informed, they aren't equipped, and they aren't held accountable for the damage that they are unintentionally perpetuating. But here's the truth. The alienated parent with the right support, strategy, and insight can still make a difference, even when the system walks away. We are not powerless, but we do need a new approach. In the next video, part 3, I'll reveal what that approach looks like. The relational repair, the long game, the trauma-informed response that gives targeted parents and their children a path back to connection.